Welcome. We're continuing with Parshas VaYeitze. This is the seventh Torah portion in the book of Genesis, Sefer Bereshis. We're using this edition here of the English translation. And the Torah is getting more and more hyper-focused into the family of now Jacob. So when we started the whole Sefer Bereshis, talking about the entire creation of the universe, God's plan for the universe, all the histories of all the peoples of the world, and then it becomes more and more focused on the central mission of Avraham Avinu to bring the whole world to know the existence of God Almighty. Then his son Isaac, Yitzchak Avinu, then his son Jacob, Yaakov Avinu, and Jacob our father. So last week we talked about this cosmic struggle between Jacob and Esav, and the resolution is put on hold because Esav has in mind to kill Jacob, and his mother warns Jacob, and then he flees to go to where his uncle is. Welcome. Go flee to where his uncle is to now go marry one of his cousins, and so we're putting on hold this whole scene with Esav. You want to grab the copy? This whole cosmic struggle with Esav, and we're bringing now another one shelf up. Yeah, bringing now page 173, 174. We're now going to we're focusing on Jacob's life. So why is this also important to us? Because it's really setting the groundwork for the Exodus from Egypt. We need to understand the whole history. Welcome. Grab a chair. Can you grab him another? Come, this place over here. Oh, okay, great. So maybe we could put her in. She can sit there. You sit here, and we can make a table for the women over there. Okay, great. Just flip that over. Okay. Do you mind grabbing 2 more copies of this? Him and her.
This is the same one, right?
Yes. No. Yeah, the top one. Yeah, that's perfect. Exactly. Whoever has better eyesight could take the smaller one. He wants the big one. He has big glasses. Probably wants the bigger print. I want the bigger print. I would assume you do too. If you want more with the bigger print, there's more over the main section of the synagogue. Okay. So we're the building right now, the Jewish people. These are the people. Welcome. You could see there's a seat over there for you, and there's a copy, the gray copy on page 174. Is that if the print is too small, we have more copies of the big print. Okay, let us know. So 174 in the gray one. 174. Okay, so we're now going into the details of the building of the Jewish people. Jacob is going to have, we're going to see, he's going to have 12 sons. These 12 sons are going to become the fathers of the Jewish people. There's 12 heads of the 12 tribes. There's going to be 12 tribes coming from these sons. The fathers of the Jewish people are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but they now it's going to be expanding. Now there's going to be 12 tribes. And we're going to see the next chapters or the next sections of the Torah are going to start setting up the going down into Egypt. How does that go about? Because the whole purpose of going down to Egypt is that there should be a redemption from Egypt, that Egypt represents the constraints and the limitations of the world, and the idea that we are the highest and be all and end all of creation in such a way that we exclude the idea of a God that's above creation. And we start to think the whole world is based on what we see and hear, the evidence and our logic and so forth. So in order to break that, first, the Jewish people have to go into exile in the midst of that. So who are these people? Where did they come from? What's the history of the Jewish people? That's what we're studying the beginning of this in this week's Parsha. So first, we have Jacob now. He's now leaving his home, And he goes and he's going to go find the wife. But first of all, as he's traveling, we see here in chapter 28 of the book of Genesis, he comes to Har Moriah, the Mount Moriah. This is the same place that Abraham brought Isaac up as an offering. And God told him that he didn't want him as an offering, but he wanted, remember that Abraham took a ram as a sacrifice instead of his son. And it comes to the same place, and he sleeps there. He takes these stones, he puts stones around his head and around his body, and then he lays down and go to sleep. So now he has a dream, and in that dream he sees this ladder that's on the ground, standing on the ground, and it's sloping upwards, and its top reaches the heaven. And he sees angels of God who were accompanying him on this trip. They're going up the ladder, and then there's other angels that are coming down the ladder. This is what his vision is in his dream. And these angels represent the ones that were taking care of him in the land of Israel, because the angels of the land of Israel can't go outside the land of Israel, and vice versa. And then new angels were coming in to accompany him further. And if you look at verse 13, it says, God was standing over him, and he said, I am God, God of Abraham, your forebear, and God of Isaac. And I will give you the land which you are lying to you and your descendants, meaning the land, Holy Land, is going to be given to Jacob and his descendants. Now, we've seen these blessings before. See the blessings again. Your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth, and you will spread out powerfully to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south. And all the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. This is an incredible, incredible blessing. If we look in the Hebrew, it says, Ufaratzta, Yama v'kedma v'tzafayna v'negba. You will. It's Ufaratza means breaking out. You'll break out of all the limitations. You're going to go to the west and the east and the north and the south, and you're going to be breaking out powerfully. And now again, it's all. While on one hand we think, okay, we're focusing on the lineage and the history of the formation of the Jewish people, meaning the sons and daughters of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But at the same time, it all revolves around the nations. It revolves around all the human beings in the world. Because in the midst of this blessing that he's promising Jacob that he's going to take care of him, he's going to guard him, and he's going to bless him with many, many offspring, he's saying that all the nations in the world are going to be blessed. So we see that God's intention is that Jacob and his children are going to be, we're going to see that Jacob is going to, in the next week's Torah portion, he's going to receive a new name, Israel. But the B'nai Jacob, the B'nai Israel, are going to be the catalysts for the change and the liberation of the entire world.
What B'nai means?
Children of, sons of. So the Jewish people, the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, meaning to say the descendants of Jacob, are the catalyst for this change in the world. That what he's going through over here to build his family and to have these 12 sons, that these sons should then become leaders and should become heads of the tribes and so forth. This is all for the benefit of the world. Because all the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. He's not having these 12 children just for himself, because he wants to have a lot of herdsmen, and he wants to have a little big operation going on there. Really, what he's doing is taking what Abraham started, which is that he wanted to reach every single human being. We said that Abraham was doing that by bringing them in as guests. Isaac continued that, working on them, digging down and finding their internal divine spark. And now Jacob's taking it to the next level. He's going to build an army of sons and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-great-great-grandchildren. We're now 100 generations later. And what's the purpose of this? This is the army that's going to be the spiritual warriors to benefit the entire world. That the whole world is going to be blessed through you, through Jacob, and through your descendants. So this is just very incredible. We have to keep this in the forefront of our understanding, forefront of our mind, to understand that this is the pivot point for the whole world, for the benefit and for the blessing of every single human being.
So the tribe from the children of Esau are not Jewish,
Correct.
are like what, Muslim? Or-
No. The children of Esau are generally linked with the Romans.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What?
Romans.
Los hijos de Saúl
Oh,
son los romanos.
Rome. Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So they're not Jewish. Okay, so then he continues. He says in verse 15, you do not need to fear Esau or Lavan. He's going to go now to his uncle. His uncle's name is Lavan. And for I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. For I will not neglect you. I'm not going to leave you without food or without clothing. I'm going to make sure that it fulfill what I promised to Abraham concerning you. The promises are going to come through you and not through your brother Esau. And meaning that your children are going to remain true to the heritage of serving God Almighty. So it says Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, God is truly present in this place, yet I was not aware of it. He didn't realize it was a holy place. But really, you could think about that. He was waking up to the presence of God Almighty in the world, because God is in this place. And he became afraid. How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gateway to heaven. He rose early in the morning and he took the stone that he placed under his head. So we see that it started with stones and now became a stone. It all became miraculously one stone. Those started as 12 separate stones. It became one, meaning to become a unified nation. And he set it up as a monument, and he poured oil on the top of it, consecrating it as an altar. And the place is called Beth El, the house of God. Beth El. And then Jacob makes a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will protect me physically on this journey that I'm undertaking, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, and protect me spiritually from Lavan's evil influence, so that he can return to my father's house untainted by sin, and God should be both my God and the God of my children, then the stone that I've set up as this monument will become a house of God. This is the place where the Holy Temple was built by King Solomon.
Or that's exactly what it is.
Yes.
Where the road was built.
Yeah. And then that's where this sacrifice will be brought. And he says to God, I will set aside for you 1/10 of everything that you give me, as my forebears did. So he's recommitting to the concept of massive tithing. He's giving 10% of his money, of all everything that he gets, animals, everything. He's giving 10% to God.
He was the first person creating tzedakah.
No, we see Abraham already gave 1/10 to Melchizedek after the battle with the kings that had stolen Lot. And
Melchizedek was the
Shem. He was Shem. He was the priest. He was the priest before Abraham.
but Seth, right?
Shem.
Yeah.
Shem Yeshiva Shem Ve'ever.
Yeah.
Shem was same name, same Melchizedek. Shem is his name, Melchizedek is his title, and Abraham brought him tithes, 10%. So a person he's saying this is the whole foundation of his life is going to be giving 10% of his income to God and to what's important to God.
and how can we do the 10% to God? Has to be always to institute like a church or whoever we want, or how it works?
Because
So we
she's trying. What he's
I
trying.
understand
to
the question.
because so many people have come from our country that like we're just giving a lot of money. Like,
Right. So
is it that counts or not? That,
so it really it depends. If you have a financial obligation to support somebody, you can't treat supporting your wife or your kids as charity, because you have your own obligation to do that. You have your own contractual obligation and godly obligation to do that. But if you're supporting poor people, then that counts as charity. And the poor of your own city come before the poor of another city. Meaning to say, you live here, so you have to give money to the poor people here before you're going to send money to the poor people in a faraway state. And then the people in your family the closer the relation is, the closer the precedence they are to giving charity.
But what happens if people from Because one thing is tzedakah, when you give, the less fortunate. When people ask you money, each time, they play victim to ask money. Is that count tzedakah? Is that considered
Well,
tzedakah?
are they honest or not honest? Do they really need the money? Don't really need the money.
There's always a problem with them, problem never stops,
Right. So
But
you
it's-
want to encourage people to stand on their own 2 feet.
What is it?
You want to encourage people to stand on their own 2 feet,
Exactly,
to
yeah.
be productive and to not make mistakes that are going to cause them to lose their money.
The lesson appears like never to happen. They always have a problem. They already got used to it. They want more money. They want more money. I'm like,
Maybe what I do now, if I feel good giving to that people, whatever they asking or helping to those people, I do. But if I don't feel like, happy or good giving, their request, I don't do that. Because I don't feel it.
Right. So you could use that as a guide also. You
but,
have to
but
see you get to choose what you're going to prioritize.
according to Torah, what we're saying is prioritize, inner, then pull people from the city and then people from outside the city.
Right. And you also want to make sure, like we see here, that there's a priority given. Let's say Abraham was giving money to his tithing to the priest, the one who's the Torah teacher, which was Shem, and he's giving the same with Isaac and same with Jacob, meaning to say that it's not just the institutions, meaning to say, but you're giving for the purpose of supporting the Torah learning, because that's important also. That we see that the Jewish people are commanded to give 10% to the Levites, and then they have to support the priest, the Kohanim, because otherwise that's the whole survival of the people is the spiritual teachers, and the spiritual teachers don't have time. They're supposed to be freed up from working. So the Levites don't have the tribe of Levi doesn't have a portion in the land, so that they can't be busy working
That
the
was
land.
my second question, because it's not only what we give to other people. I use asking too for, church.
No,
mission.
I mean, it has to be like sure, right?
Yeah, you have to
because-
figure out a divide. So you want to give some of what you're doing to poor people and some of what you're doing to places of Torah studies, places that are teaching the truth and providing where your spiritual sustenance is coming from. You want to support that also, because you need that, and that provides Torah teaching to the world. That's very, very important. It doesn't just go on its own. You don't want your teachers to be having to take time away from learning Torah and teaching Torah to go and take another job. That's not going to help you. You want your teachers to be busy all day learning and teaching, because that's really ultimately what every human being is supposed to be doing. When it says when Mashiach comes, the whole occupation in the entire world, Jews and non-Jews, is going to be to learn Torah.
Really?
Yes, we're not going to be doing anything else. We'll have all the robots, making the food. We're going to sit and we're going to study like this from the morning till the night, every day, for the rest of eternity. Can't get better than that.
Right, but and then how do you put in practice if you're studying it?
How do you put in practice what?
If you're studying Torah, the whole point is to
Practice what.
practice what you learn, right?
Well, you got to be loving and careful and kind,
I see.
and there's many things you could do without having to be, harvesting crops.
I see. So I mean, the best way I believe, like from the portion, just the big division, this is what we can provide, to here. To
Hey,
here.
take, let's say, I just give an example. You could take, let's say you have $100,000, take $100. It's going to go to charity. If you're going to give 10%, you take $200 if you're going to give it to 20%. And you take the 100, you could put 50 towards helping the poor people and 50 towards supporting your spiritual source and supporting Torah. That's how you could divide as an example.
Yeah, I understand.
It makes more sense because we were like a little like here, there, like how, because when we have, so let's make a percentage and this is what we can help here.
Right. And then that's right. You want to make sure, see, it says don't give tzedakah just like without any measure. Like on one hand, you want to help people. On the other hand, you have to, first of all, calculate, make sure you're giving the 10%. You should separate that immediately from any income, any net income that comes in after expenses and after business expenses. And after taxes, you take the net income and you give your tithing from that.
For example, if I produce today, like 200, for example, I have to take out 10% of that 200, every that
Well, it's 200 in personal income or 200 in business income.
either one.
Okay, so the difference is like this. If you're running a business and the business brings in $200 today, that's not $200 in profit. Because later this week, you have to pay the phone bill and you have to pay the gas bill and you have to pay the employees and you have to look at the monthly profit, the net income, and then what you're taking home as a salary, right? That what you're taking out of the business is your hopefully net profit, right? If you're taking too much out of the business is going to go bankrupt.
So if I make, for example, $4,000 yesterday, but my salary is 20% of that.
Right.
So like whatever the business give, my salary is 20% is $800. So the tzedakah is I can have $80 to
Right, but before you give the tzedakah, you want to how much you have to owe in taxes. If your business, let's say you're running $4,000, so $3,200 is going to other business expenses, correct?
correct.
And now you're taking 20%, which is $800, but you have to pay, let's say, 15 or 25% in taxes
Out of the
800. So now you have to set that aside because you don't want to end up with a bill to the government for taxes. So now let's say, just an example, you're going to set aside 20%. So 20% of the 800 is going to be $160. You're going to put that in a separate account for taxes and then write a check to the United States, Internal Revenue, United States Treasury, right? That $800 minus 160 now leaves you with $640. That's what you have to pay the tithing on.
I see.
Because the taxes is that's not your money.
See, but that's very important because sometimes people don't know.
Right.
We don't know.
So now you
That's the
take
question.
$640, you're gonna pay $64. So out of $4,000 sounds like a lot of money. I mean, it's a significant amount of money, but it's not really your money. You owe it to your subcontractors, you owe it to your marketing, your business expenses, gas, tolls, or rentals, whatever. Excuse me. So the actual net income of the business is $800, and your actual take home after taxes is now only $640. So that's what you have to give tithing. Now, if you're working somewhere, if you go to show up at a job, so you don't have any expenses of the business because you're not the business. So now let's say you come home with $200. That $200 is going to be what do you have to pay in taxes? Let's say they hold your taxes for you. So you get a check for $200 after they took off taxes. Now you're going to tithe. That's going to be $20, 10%. If you're going to give 20%, it'll be $40.
I don't pay taxes.
I mean, if you're not,
it's a sarcastic joke. But she does close her company, just in case. The first year.
you know what? We have an opportunity in this country to be able to change how the taxes are spent. We have an opportunity in this country to change how much taxes there are. But we also have an obligation to realize that there are certain expenses that we should be paying in towards. So, we have to, someone's paying for it at the end of the day. If we're not paying our taxes, then either someone else, your neighbor's paying instead, or your kids are going to end up paying. Because what happens is if the government has less income, the government has to borrow the money. To pay back the money, they have to print money. So the value of everything goes down anyways. So the real problem is the government spending too much money, and it's spending things on money on things that they should not be spending money on, that are against the Torah and against the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai. That has to be stopped. But in the meantime, we have to know that God's taking care of us. Why does a person feel that they're not going to pay taxes? Because they're afraid if they pay taxes, they're not going to have enough money.
Correct.
So you have to calculate that. You can't do these calculations. You have to say it's the government says that you owe them this amount of money. You could have an argument whether you under the Constitution, you have to pay the money, whether they have a right to charge the money. You can go to Congress and say that there shouldn't be any tax or this tax should be low. That's all very good. And it's important to argue those things. But the end point is, it's not that we're afraid if the government takes our taxes money, the tax money, that we're not going to have enough. We have to pray and make a vessel for enough. We have to act like there's going to be enough.
Beautiful, right? Beautiful. That's what.
Thank
See,
you.
You're very
maybe
welcome.
sometimes we didn't have a father, a strong father, to tell us, what's the right thing to do. That's why we got,
Relationship like that. This is afraid about pay taxes, scared about what taxes is, or I don't know. So it's good, to have that kind of.
the knowledge. I mean, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know. You
Right.
don't
The Jewish people are very careful about paying taxes. Meaning to say, if there's a legitimate tax, if it's a tax that some guy comes to you from the government and says you should pay, he makes something up, you don't have to pay it because it's an illegitimate tax. But if it's been approved according to the laws of the country, then it's something that you have to be careful about. And there's a story told about the Tzemach Tzedek, actually, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, that he wanted to mail something. And he, they have, you have to buy stamps. So you want to mail something, you have to put a stamp on it. But if he one of his chassidim was there and he wanted to send a letter with that chassid, with one of his students. So he didn't have to, and he's not sending it with the postal service. What did he do? He took a stamp and he put it on the envelope and he canceled it. And he sent the letter with his friend and they asked him, why are you doing that? You don't have to pay a stamp, use up a stamp to send the money with your friend. He says, because the government's going to the trouble to provide a postal service. And I'm finding a legitimate way not to use the postal service, but I'm depriving the postal office of what it would have earned from me having mailed it, right? I'm about to go put it in the mailbox. It's, oh, my friend is here, you take it instead. So now the postal service is going to lose 55 cents or 60, whatever it's up to today. It's going to lose this money. So he paid for the stamp as if he was using the postal service. So the postal service should not lose. That's a very, very high standard of recognizing that we have a responsibility. Someone's going to the trouble to maintain a postal service. And if we don't use it, then it's losing money. So he was making the effort they should have the benefit of getting paid for the postal service, even though he wasn't actually using it with that envelope, with that letter. So we just have to be very, very conscious of that. And we also have to recognize, even though there's a tremendous amount of stuff that goes to waste, and a tremendous amount of stuff that goes to things that are completely forbidden according to the Torah, and must be stopped. At the same time, we are benefiting from various services, right? If you live in a city in the United States of America, you have a fire department, a police department, you have someone's doing the roads, someone's fixing the roads, someone's putting up the traffic lights, all these things, you're using these all day. So how can a person say, I'm not going to pay in for that? Because really, at the end of the day, whatever taxes you don't pay, then the other guy, your neighbor, has to pay it. So you're kind of forcing him to pay it. Like I said before, your kids. So it's a balance. You have to take care of your responsibilities. Yeah, if that's what the situation is. Now, it doesn't mean you have to do whatever the government wants in the sense of that's the way it is. So we have to do it. No, we have to go and change it. We have to speak up and we have to say, no, we don't want these high taxes. We want people we don't want to be sending money to things that are against the Torah and undermine God's, the knowledge of God in the world. So now everyone here has to work harder to then pay for things that are going against God. If we would cut the taxes to a fraction of what they are, he would have time. They have more time with their families, more time at home, and more time to study Torah. That's what we want the world to get to.
Yeah, it's true.
And when you can see how it's going to be possible to spend our time learning Torah, because when if people are connected to God Almighty, there's not going to be any fighting, no competition, no war. What percentage of the American budget is for military expenses? I don't know exactly what percentage is, but it's a enormous percentage. If we didn't need that anymore, we would cut right there all this. Now, if we took out all the money that's being used to fund all kinds of preventing children from being born in third world countries and sterilization programs, all kinds of USAID and all these terrible, terrible programs, that's against the Torah. That's murder. So even to prevent a pregnancy is murder. So how can we be part of this? We cut out all those things. We start cutting this, that, bang, 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 bang. We'd be left with a very, very small government budget. And everyone could afford it. It wouldn't interfere with our lives the way it does today, that we're paying this a massive amount of tax. So this is going back to now chapter 28, verse 22. This commitment to giving, this tithing is very, very important. And we have to understand that our success, our financial prosperity comes in the merit of our commitment to that. It's not afterwards, okay, if I make this amount of money, then I'm going to give. No, I want to give, and in the merit of my commitment to giving, God Almighty is going to bless us. We want to be in a mode of giving, not in a mode of taking. So chapter 29 starts and says, Visi Yaakov Roglov. Yaakov's feet were lifted up. So what this means is because he heard this good news. He was coming from a very difficult situation. Remember, he was fleeing his parents' house because his brother wanted to kill him. He had no money. He had nothing. In fact, what happened was that Esau, his brother, wanted to kill him, and he heard that Jacob was leaving, so he sent his son. Esau's son, Eliphaz, to go and kill Jacob.
Oh, yeah.
But Jacob was Esau's brother. Jacob was Eliphaz's uncle. So Eliphaz came to Jacob, and Eliphaz, this was his uncle. He loved his uncle. He grew up with his uncle, but he had a problem. What was his problem? His father commanded him to kill Jacob, and you have to listen to your father. Now, you don't have to listen to your father when goes against God's will, but it's still, he has a problem. His father told him to go kill Jacob, and at the same time, he doesn't want to do it. So Jacob said, "Here, you take my clothing, take everything I have, because a person without clothes is considered dead. So when you take my clothes, it's gonna be like he'd killed him. It's gonna be like he did. He can go back and tell his father that he did what he needed to do." So that's how he had nothing. He literally had nothing. Plus, now he's traveling into this very, very difficult situation with his uncle that he was going to go to live by, and the uncle was completely
a rip-off, right?
Rip-off and a dishonest person and had wicked ways and so forth. So now all this is weighing on him, but God comes to him and says, "I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to protect you. Your offspring are increase like like we said already over here, that the dust of the earth, and they're going to spread out, and all these promises are going to be fulfilled." So this is incredible. So what happens? His feet are just lifted up. So what does this show us? When we're in a positive state of mind, our actual physical body becomes lighter.
Yeah, sure.
So we need to recognize this. The Torah is telling us this. His feet were lifted up. When your mind is in the right frame of mind, your whole body is going to be lifted. Rashi says, Nasa libay es raglav, his heart lifted his feet. What do you mean his heart lifted his feet? Because he was of glad heart, his feet were light and his feet were lifted up. So we have to remember that. We have God's promise, and God is taking care of us. God is giving us life. We have to be lighthearted all the time. That's all there is worth thinking about. So Jacob continues on, and he reaches Aram Naharaim, and he comes to this well, and the well is covered, and the shepherds are waiting. They kind of put this big lock on this well, so no one didn't trust each other, and they all had to wait to come together to lift off the well, the rock off the well, and he sees his cousin, who is Rachel, coming with her father's flock, and he knew this, and Jacob then took this was the one that he was his cousin, and he just had tremendous strength. He rolled the boulder of the opening of the well, and then watered the flocks of his uncle. So we're up to chapter 29, verse 10. So it's interesting. We're going to see later on with Moses a story also about how when he came to Jethro, when he fled Egypt, and there was a situation with the well, and and Jethro's daughters were coming to try to get water, and they were being harassed.
That part I didn't understand correctly in English. Let me translate it in
Which
Spanish.
part?
The well thing. That's I don't know.
Well, the water, the well,
The like a hole.
hole, and the water is down there. You bring a
Okay.
bucket up.
Okay.
So they covered the well. They kind of locked the well. They put in this very heavy stone on it. It was too heavy for any one man to lift.
Okay.
So all the shepherds had to come together and lift it up to roll it off together,
Okay.
because they didn't want anyone to take it while like they needed to protect themselves from each other.
Okay. I
So
see.
Jacob, when he sees his cousin who he's going to marry, he has this tremendous surge of strength, and he single-handedly takes off this rock that
Brilliant.
was too heavy for any of the other men to do by themselves. So he explains to her that he's her cousin, and Lavan comes running to greet him, and he of course thinks maybe Jacob is going to be really wealthy. Like, remember this when when Abraham's servant went to go, Lavan was there also, because Lavan is the brother of Rivka, who married Isaac.
Yeah.
So
I saw that.
Eliezer, the servant, comes with all this wealth and these camels and money and gold and jewelry and so forth, and he has this piece of paper that says that everything that belongs to Abraham is going to Isaac. So Lavan hears that now Jacob is there. He's like really excited, comes running to him, and he sees there's nothing. He doesn't have anything. He's got no camels. He's got no donkeys. He has no wagons. He's like, okay, this guy must be hiding his money. So he comes up and he gives him a big hug, and while he's hugging him, he's like feeling his pockets. And there's no money in his pockets. So he's like, okay, maybe he's hiding in his mouth. So he kisses him. He wants to see if there's anything in his mouth. And there's nothing there. Jacob had nothing. So Jacob's going to stay. So this is Lavan was quite a character.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so what do you want? So Jacob stays with Lavan for a month, and Lavan says to Jacob, what do you want to work? You want to stay and work? Pay him. What are your wages? So Jacob says to Lavan, he says that he wants to work for 7 years for the daughter Rachel. She's the younger of the twin daughters. There's Leah and Rachel, and he's going to work for her. Work for the father, to so to speak. That will be his wages, which is going to his wage will be to earn the right to marry the daughter.
Because back in those days, you have to bring money to.
Well, but this is what he was offered a. What do you want to get paid for? 7 working for now for me. So he says he wants his daughter. That's what he wanted to get paid. So he works for 7 years, and then comes this incredible deception.
Let me show something, Robert. On Judaism, there's not a belief of karma, right?
Correct.
But tikkun is kind of similar, a correction,
One second, what does that have to do with this right now?
because the same way Jacob kind of deceived Isaac.
Yes, it's a very good point you're making. But he was deceived also. Yes, very good
Right.
observation.
Like Pretty much he's reflecting.
Well, this is what Lavan is going to tell him later on.
Yeah, surprise, surprise, it's
But Lavan knows what happened with Esav. You're going to see. Well, watch what's going to happen.
Okay.
Okay. So now they have the wedding. So Lavan wants to give Leah, the older daughter, to Jacob instead of Rachel. And so he plays a trick on him.
Yeah.
How does he play the trick? So first of all, it's interesting when you going to come to a Jewish wedding, you're going to see that the bride's face is covered. By the wedding ceremony, the groom covers her face, and then her face is covered. Now, so also what he did is he has had two other daughters, Bilhah and Zilpah, and they were like from a maidservant, a concubine, and they were also his daughters. And so he gave each one of them to be like a maidservant. So he took the younger one to be a maidservant for Leah, and Jacob was watching there at this wedding, and he assumes that the bride is Leah, and he sees that she's being assigned as her maidservant, the younger one. So it must be Rachel's the younger one. It's all a setup. And Rachel knew that Rachel knew that he was going to play this. Father's going to play a trick. So they had decided. Jacob and Rachel had decided between themselves secret signs that they would know that they were really that there was really Rachel. But when Rachel saw that her sister was going to be sent to be married with Jacob and was going to now be very embarrassed because after the wedding ceremony, she wouldn't know the secret signs. So Rachel told her sister the secret signs. So Leah knew the secret signs. So the whole night, Jacob didn't know that it was really the older sister.
Really?
Right. He thought it was really the younger sister.
Wow.
So the next morning he wakes up and he sees his wife is the older sister. So now he goes to Lavan. He says, "What have you done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I worked for you? Why did you deceive me?" So now here Lavan replies. So listen to this. He says, "We don't do it like this in our place to give the younger one before the older one."
Right.
Okay, so what does he say in our place?
On this town.
In this town, not like in your town where you put yourself ahead of the older one, right? Because Jacob's the younger one. Jacob got himself the blessing. He went, like you're saying before, he went in and disguised himself, presented himself as in the place of his older brother. So we don't do that here, he says. We don't put the younger one ahead of the older one. To give you Rachel first before Leah is putting the younger one ahead of the older one. We respect the rights of the older one.
So he knew.
Yes, because you, Jacob, didn't respect the rights of your older brother.
So he knew that, right?
Right. So this is his excuse why he played this trick on Jacob. Okay. So it's interesting that this whole flow of what happened a while earlier with the deception of his father to get the blessing. Now the trick is being played on him. That's very similar.
And he wanted to continue tricking him because he didn't want to give him the money that he.
Well, that comes later. Then there's a lot of tricks, right? That Lavan does. So now he says, okay, you can have the younger one also, but you have to work another 7 years. Now, one thing I don't know if I mentioned this, I was meant to mention this. So we talked about how Jacob had the dream and so forth, and he went on his way and he learned for 14 years between the time that he fled from his parents' house and when he arrived at Lavan was 14-year gap. And that he studied Torah. During that time, he studied Torah in the yeshiva Shem V'Eber. That's what he was doing for 14 years, is studying Torah. So it shows how important studying Torah is. So, okay, so now he's married to Leah and Rachel. And now we see in chapter 29, verse 32, we see Leah has 4 sons, Reuven, then she has a son, Levi, then she has a son, another son, Yehuda. I'm sorry, Reuven, and then Shimon. Second is Shimon.
What number are you?
Verse 32 is Reuven. Verse 33 is Shimon. Verse 34, you see where we are?
Yeah.
Verse 34 is Levi. And verse 35 is Yehuda.
I see.
So she already had 4 of the sons. Then Rachel, the younger sister, sees that she's not getting pregnant. She's not having any kids. So she says, okay, she starts to ask, Jacob to give her kids. And he's like, wow, am I in the place of God who's denied you the fruit of your womb? Clearly, Jacob was saying, it's not his fault that she doesn't have kids. He already has kids from another woman. So then she says, okay, take her maidservant, just like Abraham. Sarah gave Hagar to Abraham to bear children. So she said the same thing. She gave him her bondwoman Bilhah, and she had children with Jacob. And that is Dan. So the first son that Bilhah had is Dan. So we're now up to 5 boys. And then she had another son, and that's Naphtali. Had another son, Naphtali. Okay, so now we're up to 6 sons.
What number are you?
I'm on just verse 8 of chapter 30. Let's translate it over here.
Oh, I see.
Okay, then Leah sees that she's not going to have any more kids, and that her sister gave her bondwoman to Jacob as a wife. So she took Zilpah, her bondwoman, and gave her to Jacob as a wife. So now Zilpah had another son, had his first son for her, but now the 7th son for Jacob is Gad. Then she had another son, and that is Asher. So now we're up to 8 sons. Then there's an incident in verse 14 where Reuven collected flowers that were good for fertility, and because he knew that his mother Leah wanted to have more children, and but Rachel bargained for those flowers and ended up trading a night with Jacob, with her sister, and or giving that night to Jacob. And so Leah had another son. That was 5th son, and that's Yisachar. So that Yisachar is now the 9th son for Jacob. And then Leah conceived again and had another son. This is the 6th son she brought for Jacob. This is the 10th son, and that's Zvulun. And then again, Leah became pregnant, but she knew that here's the thing, that everyone knew by prophecy that there were going to be 12 sons. Okay, so we have Leah had 6 sons already. Bilhah had 2. Zilpah had 2, so that's already up to 10 sons. So if Leah is going to have any more sons, it means Rachel, her sister, still hasn't had no kids. She's not going to be able to, if she's not going to, well, you can still fulfill a prophecy, but Rachel's going to be pushed out. Maybe she's only have 1 kid, which is less than the maidservants, the bondwoman, Bilhah and Zilpah. So out of respect for her sister, she prayed that this child that she conceived should be a woman. It should be a girl, and her name was Dinah. So now this is Dinah. This is she didn't want her sister to be she judged herself not wanting, this is verse 21, did not want her sister to be humiliated. Okay, now Rachel finally has her first son, and she names him Joseph. Okay, Joseph is going to be the one that saves all the children of Jacob, because he gets sold into slavery, and he becomes the second to the king in Egypt. So now it's time to go, and Jacob says, okay, give me my wife and children, my wives and my children, I want to go. But Laban knows that he's having all this blessing because of the presence of Jacob. And he started, and before then, Laban only had daughters. He didn't have any sons. But when Jacob came, Laban himself started to have sons. So, okay. So then Laban says, okay, what's the payment that you're going to take now? What payment do you want? And they go through this process where he says, I don't want anything from you outright, but I want to be able to pasture your flocks and to tend to them. And Jacob says how he wants to make sure that he would take as payment the ones that have white, the animals, the sheep and the goats. You can see on top of page 189, the ones that have speckles or blotched or belted or ankle ringed. But first, the way he wants to set it up is that he doesn't want to take anything from Laban. So he has Laban separate the flocks and take out any animals that have any white in them, so that it can't be from the ones that Laban gave him. And then Laban took even more and ended off, he was left with like just very weak and goats that had no white markings and sheep that were not brown. So this goes on, and then so here's the thing. What the Torah is telling us over here is that how did Yaakov get the sheep and the goats to reproduce and to have white markings if they had their parents didn't have white markings, because Laban had taken all the ones with the white markings. Because what a person is, we're going to see what a person is thinking about at the time of procreation, what they're focused on has an effect on the offspring. So what he did is he took wooden sticks, and he peeled off I think it was a white ash, and he peeled off. It was fresh, not ash. It was
What number are you reading?
Verse 37. It was fresh aspen sticks, hazel sticks, and chestnut sticks, and he peeled off the bark to create these white stripes, and some were like speckles, some were like blotches, and some were like ankle rings. And he put these sticks in the water so that the female goats were looking at these at the time when they were mating, and this then affected the offspring.
Interesting. That's a strong thought.
Yeah, a person has to be very careful what they're thinking about. They can't think of anything at the time of when they're procreating.
¿Entendiste lo que dijo?
No.
Let me translate to her.
Okay.
Sé que hay un secreto como quedar embarazado, que es muy importante. Lo que es lo que tú piensas o estás procreando, porque vas a dar resultado de eso. A Jacob le hicieron un truco, dijeron, ok, todo el ganado que tenga manchas blancas van a ser tuyos. Entonces le dieron puras cabras negras y el tipo de avance llevó las cabras blancas.
So a person can only think about their spouse and holy thoughts and think about having righteous children. Can't think about anything else in the world, because that will affect the formation of the child.
Yeah, I heard something like that once from one Kabbalistic rabbi, because you bring souls to the
But here's talking about the physical body of the animals has changed. The physical bodies of the animal, the color of the animals was changed by what the mothers of those animals was visualizing at the time of mating.
Basado en qué es lo que estaba visualizando la mamá del cabro cuando estaban procreando, le cambió el color a las cabritas. ¿Qué es lo que tú piensas cuando estás procreando? Después de tener un hijo, ¿no? Let's say Genesis 30, right? Genesis 30.
Chapter 30, verses 37 to 42. Okay, so now Jacob is becoming extremely prosperous, prolific, and he purchased bondwomen, and then bondmen help him with careful as he was selling these goats and sheep that he had and he was entitled to according to the deal he made with Laban, purchased camels and donkeys, and then, but still Laban and his sons in chapter 31 were still complaining that Jacob was somehow he was becoming so wealthy, as if he was depriving Laban, even though he wasn't taking anything from Laban. And so then God says to Jacob in verse 3, return to the land of your fathers and to your birthplace, there I will be with you, And so he called his wives, Rachel and Leah, and he said to them, I can see your father's face, that his attitude towards me is not as it was in earlier days. And the God of my father has been with me. And you know that I serve your father with all my power. But your father has deceived me and changed the conditions of my payment 100 times. God did not let him harm me. Look, verse 8, if Lavan would say your payment will be the speckled ones, then all the animals would produce speckled offspring. And then Lavan would say, your payment will be the ankle ring ones. And then all the animals would produce ankle ring offspring. In this way, God redeemed your father's livestock from him and gave them to me. Okay, so now arise and leave this land and return to the land in which you were born. So the Rachel and Leah said to them, yeah, we'll let's go. We don't have any objection to leaving. And so he collects everyone together and he heads off towards returning to his father in Canaan. Meanwhile, Lavan was off sharing his flock, which was 3 days away. And Jacob didn't tell Lavan that he was leaving. So Jacob had already traveled for 3 days away until Lavan found out, because Lavan was 3 days in the opposite direction. So now there's a 6-day distance between them. Yaakov had a 6-day head start. Now in the next day he started, so now it was a 7-day journey. But he went fast. He was very, very upset because he planned to kill Jacob and his whole family, including his own daughters and grandchildren.
Really?
Yeah, verse 24. But God appeared to Lavan, the Aramean, in a dream that night, and said to him, beware of speaking with Jacob, either good or bad intent. Now, if we look over later on in the Torah, it says that when we bring the Bikurim, first fruits to the temple, we have to say, that Lavan, the Aramean, had uprooted us. So the question is, how in the world can we say that the Aramean destroyed us, uprooted us, if he just wanted to, but he didn't actually do that? Right? So the answer is that when a non-Jewish person thinks about doing something negative, it's considered as if he did it. So it's considered as if he did it. So you have to be very, very careful. Machshava ra, Kodesh Baruch Hu mistaref el ha'maisa for a non-Jew. If a non-Jew thinks something negative about doing something bad, it's as if he did it.
Really?
That shows you what high standard God Almighty holds a non-Jew, how important the role of a non-Jew is in the world. Because he has to be thinking about doing the good things he's supposed to do and actually doing them. A non-Jew can't waste any of his brain power thinking about a negative thing. So why is this? So it's very interesting, because it says that a Kodesh Baruch Hu mistaref if a Jewish person thinks a negative thought, God doesn't count it as if he did it.
Really?
But if a Jew thinks a positive thought, then God counts it as something he did. So what's the difference over here? So I'd like to suggest the following. The fundamental job of a non-Jew is to civilize the world. Make sure there's justice, righteousness, good behavior, nothing negative is supposed to be happening in the world. So that's his purpose. So if something negative is happening, if he thinks about doing something negative, he's actually going against his whole purpose in creation. Right? Even just thinking about it, he's thinking of doing the wrong thing. What does a Jew have to do? A Jew has to bring holiness into the world. He has to bring onto the foundation. You need both of them. You need the Jacob and you need the Esau. You need the foundation created by the non-Jew. The Jewish person has to bring holiness in now. Now he's going to bring in the Torah. Now he's going to bring in the service in the temple and the house of prayer for all the nations. So if he does something, if he's going to think about doing something negative. So that's not in his, it has no effect. The God's going to ignore that. Not because he's giving a free pass to think about negative things. He's saying, I'm not giving any credit to this negative thought that this Jewish person had. But if a Jewish person has a positive thought about doing something holy, God says, okay, even though he didn't get to do it, I'm going to give him credit as if he did it, because he means well. He wants to bring holiness into the world. He wants to bring good things in the world. So I'm going to treat it as if I'll give him the credit for that. The non-Jewish person, his job is to make sure to remove all traces of dishonesty from the world, all traces of crookedness and chaos in the world. So if he's thinking about doing something negative like that, then God Almighty is saying, oh, he's undermining his purpose. He's going to receive, it's going to be treated as if he did it. So that's why Lavan, who wanted to uproot the Jewish people, it's spoken about as if he actually did it, even though he didn't do it, because he was thinking this negative thought, which is the very opposite of Lavan's purpose in the world. Lavan's purpose in the world is to make sure there's no murder. And he wanted to murder his own son-in-law and his own children, his own grandchildren. So his thought is of such significance that it's considered like he actually killed his own family. So we learn over here a tremendous, tremendous lesson that every human being has to understand. Your thoughts matter. You cannot be playing around with your thoughts. You can't be saying, you know what? Doesn't matter what I think about. I can fantasize about whatever I want. I can think whatever I want. It's irrelevant. No, it makes a difference. It makes a difference, because when you're going to be thinking those negative thoughts, you're actually undermining the mission that you're here to do in the world. So God is holding you to a high standard. He's saying, hey, why are you thinking thoughts against your own mission? You need to stay on track in terms of your thoughts. So our thought, our speech, and our action are all critical here. It's critical for everybody. There's no license. There's no license for a Jewish person to think negative thoughts, and a non-Jewish person should be thinking positive thoughts. We're not. 1 second. Declining you. Thank you. So non-Jewish person should be thinking positive thoughts, and a not Jewish person has no license to think negative thoughts. It's still not a good thing. In fact, it says that a person, when they're going to think negative thoughts, it's even worse than the action, because it's staining the soul. When a person is going to, let's say, steal something, so that's a terrible deed. He's misusing his action. He's misusing his physical body. But when he's thinking about stealing, then he's staining the inner garments of his soul, the thought, which there's 3 garments to the soul. So each one is, the thought is the most refined. It's, you want to call, let's say, a white silk. And you have speech, which is still close to the soul, but it's already more external. It's a little bit more coarse. Then you have action, which is much more external to our soul, and it's much coarser. So if a person is violating God's will by action, that's a terrible thing. But it's even worse to be thinking about going against God's will, because a person he's tampering with this very refined garment that's close to him. Imagine like if you're wearing burlap, something made of canvas, and you spill coffee on it. Doesn't really make it makes a difference, but you don't notice it much. But if you're wearing a beautiful silk shirt or silk dress, and you spill even a tiny, tiny bit of, like, a little drop of coffee goes flying across the room from your cup, and you put it down too hard and it jumps up and lands on it. It's a tiny, tiny little thing, but it ruins the whole garment. So that's what thought is like. So we have to see from this the importance of our thought. We don't allow our thought to go in directions that are against God's will.
This Laban, he was idolater.
Yes,
right?
yes. We're going to see here that he starts to accuse Jacob of, why did you steal my gods? This is in verse 30, chapter 31, verse 30. And we see that why did you leave and why do you steal my gods? And he says, I was afraid. I thought that you might take your daughters away from me by force. That's why he fled without telling him. And about the idols, he says anyone among his household that has idols that are stolen from Lavan will die. Now, what he didn't realize was that Rachel had indeed, go back to chapter 31, verse 19. Rachel stole the idols that belonged to her father. She was very bothered by the fact that her father was an idolater, and so she stole these idols that he would give up the idolatry. But Lavan, you can see, was looking for them.
Yeah, I read that he used to have those in Spanish it's called small wooden things. It's a kind of witchcraft that you can communicate with those spirits, and the spirits can tell you if the reason why Rachel took that, because the spirits of those things could tell them exactly where.
Okay, very interesting.
Yeah.
So, but Jacob didn't realize that she had stolen them,
Mm.
and so he gave this curse that anyone who took them will die. And later on, we see that Rachel died on the journey.
Really?
Yeah. So, Lavan goes in to Rachel's tent first, and then he went to Leah's tent, and he went back to Rachel's tent another time, and then he went to the tent of Bilhah and Zilpah, and he still found nothing, and then he went back to. So why did he go into Rachel's tent? Second time, because he suspected her of having stolen them. Now she hid them underneath a camel saddle, and she sat on it in the middle of the tent. So when he's coming through the tent, he can't find them because she's sitting on the thing. So she says to him, "Don't be upset. I cannot rise before you because it's her time of the month. It's her monthly cycle." And so he'd searched, but he didn't find the idols. So this shows us that the concept of a man in the Torah, it says that a man cannot have contact with his wife when she is in her cycle. And this is something that was practiced by the people from the beginning of time, that there was Lavan kept his distance from his daughter, and didn't disturb her, because she said that she was on her cycle. So Jacob was now angry because he had been accused, he thought falsely, by taking the idols. And why are you coming after me like this? Verse 36. What did you find? Put it down here. I never took anything from you. I never brought you an animal that was maimed by the wild beast. Meaning to say, he absorbed the losses of anything that was damaged or stolen. And I was consumed by day by scorching heat, and by night by frost, and sleep deserted my eyes. It's been 20 years working for him. So if the God of, verse 42, if the God of my father, the God of Abraham, was the object of Isaac's dread, had not been with me, you would have now sent me off empty-handed. But God saw my plight and the toil of my hands, and he rebuked you last night. So this is exchange, and Lavan says, these are my daughters and my children. And then he says, okay, let's make a covenant. And they make a covenant together with stones and make a monument. And they say that they won't eat this mound of stones again for any bad intention towards each other. And Lavan wants to make sure that Jacob is going to take good care of his daughters. And then they slaughter animals and they have a feast together. Lavan, chapter 32, Lavan arises early in the morning, kisses his grandsons and his daughters, and blesses them, and then Lavan left and returned to his home. So Jacob continues on his way, and the angels of God is now coming back to the land of Israel. They came out to greet him and escort him back. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's encampment," and he named the place Machanaim, the twin camps. And that's this week's Torah portion. We're going to see that now what we're gearing up for now. Why did Jacob feel the time was ready for the time was ready to go now back to his home? Because he knew that going back to his home was going to bring him into a confrontation with Esav. And in order for he felt ready for the confrontation to happen only once his son Joseph was born. Because he knew that Joseph had these unique spiritual qualities, and then he felt ready that this son was going to enable him and his family to meet up with Esav and be successful. And that's what we're going to see in next week's Torah portion. Any questions? Question. The story of polygamy in this parsha seems very sad for the parties involved, and yet the people involved are obviously of towering character. How do we sort this out? Well, first of all, polygamy itself is not forbidden in the Torah. We see that many people had multiple wives. That's number one. The challenge here is over between these two sisters, this Rachel and Leah. There is a lot of tension between them, and there's a lot of pain, and there are moments of sadness. And really, this is the complexities of life in God's world. Meaning to say that they're on this mission to build this nation and to bring these 12 tribes into the world, and it was meant to be by God's divine plan that these two sisters, that Jacob would end up with 4 wives. The 2 of them were sisters and 2 of them were half sisters. Now, it's brought later in the Torah that there's a commandment against marrying 2 sisters, but this is not a commandment that applies to the non-Jews. And so since Jacob was voluntarily taking on all the other commandments, but was fully bound, since if this would be before the giving of the Torah, Mount Sinai, he was bound by the Noahide laws. So he was still allowed, under the Torah, under the 630 commandments, he's not allowed to marry 2 sisters. Under the 7 commandments, he is. And so when he was put in that very complicated situation of having married the older sister first, and he was still committed to marrying the second sister, then he went ahead. He felt he had no choice but to go ahead and marry both of them. So it is, there is a lot of struggle here. And that struggle is part of the growth. That struggle is part of, you can see in the names of the children that Leah gave to her children, her yearning for her husband's love and her distress over not receiving it, to the degree that she wanted it because it was divided, and the preference that he had for Rachel, her younger sister. There's definitely a lot of pain. So I don't know that they're towering characters, but just because a person is a towering character doesn't mean that they're not going to have experiences that are not what they had hoped for, and it's not going to be some stressful situation between 2 people. Any other questions? I hope that answers that question. I don't know if it's another way to sort it all out, but that's what comes to me in answer to your question. Anything else? Questions? If not, we'll continue next week. God bless you all. Okay, so next week, God willing, is my daughter's wedding. So it's going to be a Wednesday night. So we're not going to have a class next Wednesday night. And I would love to do a class every weekend. I would love to do a class in Parshas VaYeitze, because this coming together of Jacob and Esav, which is very, very important. We'll see how we have to make it up. Either maybe we'll do two portions the following week, just to bring it to our attention. Hope to see you all at the wedding, and God bless you all.